The views expressed on the Final Straw Radio do not necessarily reflect those of Asheville FM, Friends of Community Radio, or any of the affiliate radio stations airing the show. Airing first on Asheville FM, WSFM LP at 103.3 FM in Asheville, North Carolina, this is The Final Straw, and I'm William Goodenough. The show will later be archived at thefinalstrawradio.noblogs.org, and you can email us with questions or suggestions at thefinalstrawradio@riseup.net. Also, if you are interested in rebroadcasting any episode or segment of the show, you are free to do so. Just send us an email if you end up using any of the content. If you like, you can send us letters at The Final Straw, P.O. Box 6004, Asheville, North Carolina, 28816. This show is brought to you by Firestorm Books and Coffee. Located at 610 Haywood Road, Firestorm Books and Coffee is a worker-owned cooperative in Asheville specializing in offbeat, underground, and independent literature. You can find a sample of Firestorm's catalog of books and zines, plus a full calendar of events at their website, firestorm.coop. This week we are presenting audio from the Callisto Collective, which is a local collective, quote, addressing conflict, abuse, assault, and everything in between, end quote, by utilizing autonomous models of resolution, especially in closer-knit communities of affinity. This workshop is called Conflict Resolution for Folks Who Do Anti-State Organizing and was highlighted at this last year's Asheville Anarchist Bookfair. In the workshop, they talk about many things, including anarchist critiques of nonviolent communication, which is a developed process in use mostly by leftist organizers, possible tools for dealing with conflict, and also some discussions on yogurt, so stay tuned for that. If you would like to write with the Callisto Collective, you can email us and we will put you in touch. This was an extremely interactive workshop, and to protect the anonymity of participants, I had to cut out a bunch of material. This sometimes makes the audio a bit disjointed to listen to, but I hope you'll enjoy it all the same. Before the workshop, though, we want to plug certain hurricane relief efforts going on in town. As you are probably aware, the coasts of North and South Carolina and Georgia, as well as many regions off the coasts, are being hit right now with a quite sizable hurricane. Appalachian Medical Solidarity is helping coordinate disaster relief efforts, running supplies inland to the coast and supporting those who are doing on-the-ground relief efforts. Donations of supplies can be sent to Firestorm Books at 610 Haywood Road in West Asheville. Things which are needed include pop-top canned foods, which are high in calories that people can eat cold and without utensils, wool socks, antifungal spray, first aid supplies, any and all baby supplies including baby food, adult diapers, toilet paper, flashlights and batteries, and charged battery packs for cell phones and cell phone chargers. A full list will be posted on our blog. If you want to donate to this effort, you can go to gofundme.com/mutual-aid-relief-supplies-NC. If you are going into affected areas as a relief worker, it's very important to be networked with local efforts to foreground the work of directly affected populations. If people are interested in reading further about cultural competency and disaster work, we would suggest further reading by the Mutual Aid Disaster Network, which is available on any social media platform. You can contact Appalachian Medical Solidarity to get networked through their Facebook page, and they are coordinating efforts on behalf of those affected by hurricane flooding both on the coast and in Asheville itself. Finally, we would also like to plug a phone zap on behalf of Jason Renard Walker, a Texas inmate associated with the 2016 prison strike and who contributed to the Fire Inside zine. He has been subject to an increasingly intense campaign of harassment from the staff at the Telford unit, who first issued him with a fake case for threatening a member of staff, and then sent him to lockup, preventing him from even being able to attend his own hearing for the so-called case. The prison strike timeline has officially ended, but repression related to the strike is only just ramping up. For a full article on this case, visit itsgoingdown.org and search Jason Walker. The music you are hearing right now is the instrumental version of the track 7 by Frank Waln, who is a Sikaknu Lakota rapper and hip-hop artist. His last name is spelled W-A-L-N, and you can find his work on any streaming platform.
This is a conflict resolution without cops or something along those lines.
Conflict resolution for folks doing anti organizing. Well, I'm gonna just kind of start talking, and we'll begin. So first we just wanted to introduce ourselves. I'm he, him, they, them.
He, him, they, them.
And we both do organizing in the area, and we both are also involved with direct social service fields. So we get some experience with doing de-escalation and conflict resolution work. But with that being said, we are not experts. We're not here to speak to you as professionals. We are here because we're also just interested in learning this. I know I mess up with conflict resolution all the time, and all of us do, and that's why we're in it here together. Is that we're all trying to learn and get better at it. So we are in no way being professionals that speak to y'all. We truly are just learning along the way.
And fun fact, we're presenting this as Callisto Collective, which was born a year ago at the Anarchist Bookfair out of a workshop that we did. So. On accountability processes. So anyway, we're 1 year old. A little more because book fair was earlier. And Callisto Collective is a collective addressing conflict, abuse, assault, and everything in between in communities. Not in any way having all the answers on that, but constantly trying to come up with models that can be effective and evolve the models that we're coming up with and teaching workshops.
Just creating conversation.
Yes, that's like probably the biggest thing we're always trying to do is just generate community conversations about these topics. And it's not like we know. So we'll probably let y'all end up doing a lot of the talking in this class, if that or whatever this is, this thing that we're doing.
So just one last part of this, just a disclaimer is, so this workshop is about developing a model for addressing conflicts. So we're trying to give tangible skills of how we can work through conflict within organizing and community spaces. So it's very skills-based around conflict resolution. This workshop is not about abuse, although we recognize the confusing murky ground between conflict and abuse and everything that kind of goes between. But we wanted to say specifically this is kind of about conflict. But we do hope and encourage that people can take as much or as little out of what we're kind of showing and teaching, and expand it and develop it to whatever context you think is fit. So before we kind of go into some skills or get Cal with our conflict resolution model, we want to talk about why we're doing this workshop. Kind of why we think this is really important to an anarchist book fair, and why we encourage people to discuss this issue. So a really big thing that kind of brought it together when we talked about wanting to do a workshop like this is that both of us, and maybe a fair amount of you are fairly familiar with nonviolent communication. People kind of have an idea of what that is. So nonviolent communication I'm blanking on the name of the author.
The Nerds.
Yeah, who kind of created this therapeutic form of interpersonal relationship communication that seeks to eliminate violence and escalation when communicating. Is that?
Yeah, they're trying to transform the communication processes that were fairly typical in our culture. Yeah, which a lot of anarchists use, and they're critiques that I think we all have of that communication style, especially its name as anarchist.
So our whole thing was we want to take concepts in the model of nonviolent communication and other interpersonal building therapeutic practices such as dialectical behavior therapy, and other types of things, but apply it specifically to anti-state organizing and explicitly to people who are involved in insurrectionary revolts. So how do we, we want to create nonviolent communication for people who actively engage in violent action. So how can we we want to change nonviolent communication to people who support violence against the state. So we know that the phrase nonviolent communication doesn't work for us as anarchists, insurrectionary anarchists. So if anyone can think of a better word, holler at us, tell it to everyone else.
We were joking about anarcho-liberated communication, but that was like just if anybody wants to brainstorm of, start creating our own communication style with our own words and own that. Just because I think so many people feel a little weird about nonviolent communication and the rules that come with it.
Another phrase that I really like, because another thing that we also talked about was how we feel like these words like love, empathy, compassion is really liberal, or has been really co-opted by liberalism. This idea of love wins. When we don't believe love wins, we think that love helps us win, among many other forms of emotions and actions. And so another phrase that I really like is compassion without pacifism. So developing compassion and empathy without pacifism. Or I also like the idea of being supporting nonviolent interpersonal relationships against violent relationships with the state. Yeah, so those are kind of just some things that really brought us here.
And I just want to say one more thing about that, which is a big part of why we're teaching this is just I feel like whatever kind of anarchist projects we're involved in, whether we're actually doing insurrectionary protests in the street or whether we're creating community infrastructure, whatever we're doing, if we don't have these pieces down, we will not succeed. And I think we've all seen that way too many times. And so learning how to create really strong relationships with each other, because we will have conflict, we will hurt people's feelings, we'll suck at resolving conflict. That's okay. That's just normal part of it. But we can always keep getting better and better, and that's the most important thing. Because we don't have those super strong relationships with each other, we really don't have a movement. So I mean, we're the movement, and we need each other, and so we've got to be able to resolve conflicts. They're going to come up. Yeah, and I think a saying we really like that everybody's heard is, or at least probably most people, is be gentle with each other so we can be dangerous together. It's one of my favorite sayings, and this is a big piece of that. We've got to stay strong together and keep our relationship solid.
Yeah, and I just want to echo what Kat just said big time, because I really think it's crucial to this topic, which is that we have hurt people, we will hurt people, and we will continue to be in conflict with each other. And what we want to encourage is, instead of thinking that conflict will never happen, it's to expect that we will constantly be making mistakes, and continuing to work on how we can grow from our mistakes and be gentle and let go of our defensiveness to understand that we're all in this together, working on being better humans. One last thing about why I think this is really important, or why we both think this is really important, is that developing better conflict resolution skills and just interpersonal relationship building, dialogue skills helps nip this cycle of abuse in the bud. So if we can develop better practices for how we communicate and be in conflict with each other, it can hopefully trickle to larger issues or larger scenarios where we can then have better skills that don't involve calling the cops, or don't involve being physically violent towards our partner, that don't involve we're screaming at each other and our kid sees it and it starts replicating that behavior. So we believe that kind of by building these groundwork for what it looks like to have healthy communication and conflict resolution, that can make astronomical change to how abuse and violence and the relationship to cops as a form of escalation, it really impacts that. Yeah, so that's just kind of some reasons why we think this is important. And so now we kind of want to go into this conflict resolution flowchart.
I've been really excited. People have let me know for some reason I got so excited about this flowchart. We're thinking if people want a copy of it, give us your contact information because we can take pictures back to our house and then send that out to whoever would like a picture of it. Keeping in mind, like, this is not, just adapt it. Take a picture and then scribble all over it, please, and evolve it to fit your situations in your community. Okay, so we're going to go over this really quick and then start talking about some communication techniques and kind of open that up for all of us to talk about what communication techniques are useful for talking about feelings, for listening, for dialoguing. And then we're going to do a little exercise. Everybody loves group work, right? Small group work. But this part, I'm just going to kind of go over it real quick, and then when we're talking more as a group, we can like scribble all over that or ignore it altogether, or whatever the heck we want to do with it. But this is the flow chart that we've come up with, that when we are successfully using conflict resolution, this has worked for us, not in any way to imply that we're always successful at our conflict, but we try at any rate. So the first question I think is useful to ask is this a conflict? AKA, is this my own issue I'm projecting? Like Joe, the example of that from this morning, we're wondering why we got scheduled at 10 a.m. on Saturday morning. We're like, probably the book fair organizers hate us, and that's the whole reason. So like,
really reasonable projection.
Yeah. So like, is that actually a conflict, or is that an issue we're projecting? Obviously, it's an issue we're projecting. So if it is that, which in this case it is, yes, would it be helpful to let this person know? Should we tell the fair people how we feel about this? Would it be helpful to let them know how we feel about early morning workshop times after punk shows? Possibly. Would it be helpful to let them know that we think they hate us and project? That might not be actually that helpful. That's probably just our issue that we need to work on and get some support, go to therapy, whatever we need to do. If it is helpful to let somebody know about your own issue that you're having, where it's not really a conflict, but it just would be useful, we want to start with getting consent. And I feel like that's a really important principle that sometimes we forget. We're like, well, I have a feeling, so I'm going to go ahead and talk about it. And actually, we need to check with people first. And that conversation is going to go a lot better, in my experience, if we have consent from them. So if we're like, hey, can I check in with you about something that happened last week that I'm a little upset about?
Actually, now's not the right time because I feel really grumpy and I want to make sure I'm present and can hear you later, and I want to have my own crap come up.
Yeah.
So can we talk about this maybe tomorrow?
Yeah, tomorrow works. Okay. So get consent, set up a time. Yep.
Would you be able to expand a little bit more on what we mean by projecting? Like when we talk about when you're projecting your own issue, could you talk about that, or does anyone want to?
I'll let you.
I just want to clarify that because that feels really big when we talk about like what is conflict. Does anyone project when you're projecting your own feelings? What do we mean by that? Or like is this my own issue, or am I projecting or not?
You can think about that book fair like they hate us example, or examples from your own life.
Something that I like to think of is, and we're going to talk about this more later, but it's just like, is this feeling or fact? So it is not fact that hates us for scheduling us at 10 in the morning. It's a feeling. So it's not a feeling. But so like I said, so it's like instead of me being like, you hate us, and Scott's like, I never said that. But no, it's true because I feel it. It's negotiating, being like, okay, I'm just having this feeling, and that feeling is valid, but let's check what's the reality of this situation. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really good part.
Okay, so
and we'll talk when we talk about communication. We'll talk more about how to talk about those feelings that are really hard, that we're maybe projecting, but we still need to talk about them. So how to take responsibility and own them, and still talk about them without projecting, which it's tricky. but it's super doable. So yeah, if we are gonna go to the book fair and explain that 10 a.m. Doesn't work for us next time, we can passive aggressively do that by talking about it in a workshop. Actually, that's a thing we haven't really put on here. We have a whole section on like murky communication that is not going to go in this workshop, but I think most people know passive aggressive is when we're indirectly communicating something that actually would be better served by just explaining what's going on with us. But we're finding ways to allude to it and allude to our feelings without like saying that really directly. So anyway,
if I put up a string to make a trip over it without telling
that gets a little aggressive.
Yeah.
So if we're going to do that, we're going to ideally find a neutral location, have a little plan for how we're going to talk about it, be accountable for our own issues, share feelings respectfully without blame, and then take care of ourselves afterwards. And this is still in this situation where it's like, this is our issue. We're not even really dealing with conflict in this situation. We just want to let somebody know, like, hey, this thing didn't actually work so great for me. I get it was well intended. Could we do it a little differently next time? And just keep it simple when we're clear that we're not actually dealing with a conflict and work really hard not projecting a conflict onto the other person. And we're not going to spend a ton of time on that. We're going to mostly talk about actual conflicts in this workshop. So going back to the beginning, is this a conflict? Is this my own issue I'm projecting? We've gone through that. So if the answer is no, a disagreement has actually occurred that bears discussing, then we're in conflict resolution land, potentially. But the next question is, do you feel a safety issue is present? And one thing that I was just alluding to that we're starting to want to deal with is the murky safety issue. So there's no safety issue isn't present. I feel scared and vulnerable, but I know I'm safe. Yes, safety issue is definitely present. There's been clear crossing of boundaries. That's a different workshop, and get support on that. And then the other issue is somewhere in between, maybe. Like, it's a really complicated situation. So you or another person may be behaving in ways that are destructive to somebody else's reality, trying to hurt their livelihood, sending out group texts about the person that aren't like, oh, like this is a clearly defined decision, we're blasting this person because they date raped 10 people or something in our community, but just, being very toxic, and generally making somebody else's life very, very difficult. Those are very murky, complicated situations. We are going to be working on developing a workshop for how to deal with those, because I feel like a lot of conflict resolution and or accountability processes end up falling in that territory, because in a certain sense nobody quite knows how to deal with those, and honestly we don't really either. So we want to start having some community generated workshops on how to handle those situations.
So I just want to clarify something about what we mean by, do you feel like it's a safety issue, and the part where kind of what we're trying to get at is at what the concept of what is safety that's really tricky. And I think that one thing we want to mention is and what we're trying to get at is in what form of community involvement involves in what way does the community need to be involved to ensure your safety. So an example that I think with the part says, no, I feel scared and vulnerable, but I know I'm safe. I think that some of us, and I'm going to speak for myself, there's times in which I felt so vulnerable and raw because of an emotion and a conflict that I felt unsafe, but it wasn't, it was my projection of the experience of feeling so vulnerable. Or the projection of, another example is conflict feels really horrible. When someone's mad at you, it feels absolutely horrible, and that it made me feel almost terrified to be in that space with them just because I knew that they were mad at me. That would be an example of it feels really hard in your body, but does it involve like a community intervention that someone doesn't like you because you're having conflict. Obviously, there's murky ground to that, but I think it's important for me to, and I'm sure some of y'all to challenge, like, just making sure that we savor the phrase safety and like getting community precautions of safety for times when there's an important moment of intervention. It's hard to like feel like someone's really mad at you and be the same workshop at a book fair together.
Yeah, and then when you're in conflict, therefore, and we like throw aftercare and self-care in here and there, but it's really, really important to take good care of ourselves because it is really hard. Maybe you and your partner just broke up, and here you are at the book fair, and it's not going well. It might not be an unsafe situation. It might not even be in that murky, toxic, manipulative, like crazy kind of ground over there. Like maybe everything's fine. It just sucks, you know. And we need to take care of ourselves in those situations. Get some support. Make sure we have a buddy who is hanging out with us, who we can check in with during the weekend. Anytime we have any conflict, we tend to need a lot of support because conflict feels very, very vulnerable. And it does feel scary. Even if we know we're safe, it still feels really scary. It's uncomfortable ground for us. We haven't been raised in a culture, most of us, where like that's just cool and we can just work those things out pretty easily and have great skills for that. So all these other things are other workshops. And we're not going to talk about them today, even though they're really, really, really flipping important and possibly more important in a way than what we are talking about. We're just going to talk about conflict resolution. And these little conflicts are what we deal with more often than anything else. And if we're not dealing with them and they're building up, they really do affect our movements, even if they're like pretty small things. So do you think that you and the person can talk it out together? So if the answer is yes, you don't really want to, you don't feel like it, but yeah, it would probably go okay, then we're going to go back over to this situation here. You're going to get consent from the person. Hey, I'd like to check in with you about some stuff. Can we find a time? Find a neutral location. Have a clear plan. Be accountable for your issues. So it's not like I feel like you hate me. It's like actually I'm feeling really insecure. Book fair is overwhelming. I just want to check in about workshop times. Share feelings respectfully without blame, and then take care of yourself afterwards. This is really important. It's just anytime we like just go ahead and handle a conflict, we should give ourselves huge pats on the back and huge high fives and all those things, and brag to our friends about how we did it and all that stuff. Like we really deserve the extra support, and go take care of ourselves, take time alone, do whatever is self-care for you. Don't neglect this part, and don't make light of the fact that you just dealt with a conflict, because that's huge. Even if it was just a little thing, it's just, for most people, it's pretty big and pretty stressful to handle any conflict at all. So going over here, you know you're safe. You think you and the person can talk it out together, and the answer is no. So it's either a really deep, old issue that's been going on for a while, or your communication styles are really different and you're really concerned about how that's going to go, or, and this is really common, you already tried and it didn't go well. And I think that's when a lot of people start to throw their hands up in the air. It's like, well, I did it. I tried the conflict resolution, and actually now it's worse, and I don't know what to do, and now we're going to kind of avoid each other and do that thing that we all do where we're just like, try to hope it's going to slowly dissipate over time.
Yeah, which is difficult. I wanted to say something about mediation, which is that
Do you want to wait a second?
Oh, yeah.
Actually, like,
okay,
go over that a little
totally.
bit. I just don't let everything over here. So the next question is, are you open to mediation? And we'll go to yes in a second, because that's like somewhat more complicated. And yes, I'm over here at thought. What if the answer is no? Maybe you're not. Maybe you're like, actually, no. This person is moving to Sweden. I don't like them. I don't want to talk to them again. So the next question is going to be, does this conflict affect others? So is this conflict, you don't want to have mediation, you don't want to talk about it again. Is this going to have a big impact on your community if you don't? You know, when I have a conflict, is Callisto Collective going to fold? Or our house going to fold? Or, you know, like, how much is it going to affect our community? That's actually, especially as anarchists, an ethical consideration that we really need to think about. It's not usually just ourselves. So let's assume actually the answer is no. This was some rando who like turned up in town, we had a conflict, they're going back to Sweden, we'll probably never see each other again. Next question is, are they asking for mediation? If they are, then yes, the question is, would you reconsider mediation? You can say yes or no to that. If the answer is no, then okay. You don't have to. And you and that person can do whatever is going to work or not work. Avoid each other.
It's also okay to not like someone, not like each other. You're still worth it if someone doesn't like you.
Yeah. All of these things are based on consent, so you don't have to. Is the other person asking for mediation? No, you don't want mediation? No. Well, okay then. No mediation. So, and you'll just carry on avoiding each other or whatever it is. Or maybe if you get lucky, you'll really never see each other again. I feel like we all just like kind of have a maybe that person will go away forever. They probably won't. So this might all come up again. I forgot to put a little line to here. Would you reconsider mediation? So let's just assume that everybody says yes, and then we're going to be in this land. Yes, everybody's now open to mediation. And we're going to start thinking about how we're going to do that. So if yes, everybody is open to mediation, not working out, just to chat amongst ourselves. So we're going to get some help with that process. No shame in getting help. Conflict is really, really hard. And often we need a neutral party to help us talk it out. And then, yeah.
I just wanted to add something, which is, so I've been in several mediations as someone who's like being in the conflict with someone, and someone's mediating me and another person. I've been the mediator, and I've also been someone who's been an advocate for someone who's going through a mediation process or going through a mediation. They can be horrible, and they can be really incredible. I would highly suggest, there's an art to mediation, and so I think that the idea of someone, your friend just being there, okay, you tell me what you're thinking, and then you tell me what you're thinking, doesn't actually really work. There needs to be I just highly suggest finding someone who's either trained or is willing to read a guideline, a handbook, which those are out there, who it's almost like the mediator will follow a flow chart like this, you're going through a guideline. So I just wanted to say, I encourage, mediation is a really great and helpful thing, especially if it's structured, not just let's get our housemate to just listen to us fight.
Yeah. This thing about finding your mediator is one of the most critical parts. Just extrapolating on what you're saying, because it also, if the mediator happens to be biased in any way, which to some degree inside our community who isn't going to be biased, if there's a conflict, like most people, that can really derail the whole process. So thinking really carefully and finding out where your mediation center is in the town where you live. Those places can be really helpful. They're usually free or sliding scale. They don't give a hoot about your conflict, and they're kind of normie, but their normies will just sit there and work you through the mediation process. So sometimes that can be the most useful thing if you're not dealing with things that normies if it's going to work with normie people, and sometimes it won't. I mean, maybe this is a very activist or oriented thing. Maybe something happened in action, or maybe it's something going on in your poly relationship, and that's, then we get into more complicated ones. But ask around, find out the people in your community who do seem to know something about mediation, find out what resources they can direct you to. But you mentioned that they've been an advocate before, and that can be really, really helpful. So say I'm having a conflict, and it's so messy at this point that communication has totally broken down. It can be really, really helpful to just be like, hey, can you help me out with this mediation situation? I really want to work out my conflict. I need somebody to help us set this up. And that ideally, getting help setting it up is that you're ideally going to work with somebody who both people are going to feel safe with. Informal mediation, also, you can have an advocate or a mediator who's setting up the mediation, and then an advocate that's just your advocate, and an advocate that's their advocate, and you can end up with like kind of a lot of people present at the mediation. All of that helps. I mean, there's just no shame at all. In fact, like, amazing if we're just dealing with conflict. And I think sometimes people feel really awkward engaging mediation and all those people, like somehow they just couldn't handle their own conflict. But that is us handling our own conflicts inside our community and making our community stronger and healthier. So it's really, really amazing if we just go for it and get all those people on board if we need that.
And sometimes
level of help.
we, like, as if anyone's ever been in a mediation or like been in a really intense conversation, sometimes we get emotionally activated and like gibberish comes out of our mouth. And like we don't make sense, we start crying. And so an advocate is a really good opportunity for that point to be like, let's say it's helping me and I just started crying in a mediation. You could be like, well, what I'm hearing saying is X, Y, and Z, or like what I think he's trying to say. And so it's just a really good, it's kind of another, we all have our unique styles of communicating, and so it's sometimes really, it's really good to have another person who can kind of re-articulate something for you, especially, and specifically when it's both sides. So like, that's my advocate and Mark's is his advocate. Like, we're both together, so it's not like one person is an advocate. But also I don't want it happens. Yeah. It happens. And it could be alright.
And it'll be okay.
It'll be okay.
Most bigger cities, like I said, have mediation centers, and most mediation centers offer training in peer support, advocacy, mediation. So let's just say in your city you had a little collective like Callisto Collective, encouraging people, as many people as possible, to get trained in all of those skills is amazing. Because then when there's a conflict in the community, people know, like, okay, I'll just call and see what they think about this situation. They know that there's a resource instead of everybody always reinventing the wheel every time. So if you're interested in creating a little resource like this, you can chat with us. Where, we can't, and most like little anarchist collectives can't do all the things, but we can definitely be resources for people who need help, and that's how Callisto ends up functioning. But where people in Asheville know that if there's a abuse situation, conflict situation, assault, whatever, they tend to quietly contact us and find out what resources we know might be available for them. So we're kind of like a referral center right now.
And we know of people who are trained mediators in town who are like privy with like community organizing, and we know we have we just can connect people to other folks, which is really rad.
So if you and the other person are open to mediation, if yes, then the question is, would you or they, like an advocate to coordinate it? And if the answer is no, you got this, then go ahead. If it's not like that complicated a conflict that maybe you need mediation, but everybody's able to be like, you want to just get mediation? Yeah, okay, sure, let's just get mediation. Do that, what I just said, get consent. Don't spring mediation on anyone ever. It's happened. Do it. Find a mediator, chat, find a mediator that you're both going to feel good about. Ideally, somebody who's trained. And this is the biggest piece right here. I often see people get really, like, they're going strong right through there. They find the mediator and then they drop the ball. And that's really easy to do. It's like, somehow it's like, we got that far and it took a lot of energy and just trying to like take it all the way home and get the mediation scheduled and do the mediation sometimes seems to feel like too much. And it does sometimes seem like as people have talked enough to find a mediator, they're starting to work out their conflicts. So now and again, you know, people end up deciding they don't need a mediator, but just the same, don't drop the ball. If you're like, actually, we're already talking about this, let's just finish talking it out. That's great, but just follow through on the conflict and then get support for yourself.
You're listening to a conversation with the Callisto Collective. This is The Final Straw on 103.3 FM in Asheville.
I think it's also that like that drop off of those steps could also potentially be just knowing that there is someone out there or there are people out there in the community who are willing to help just like makes people feel really supported and really held, and that can also like start to like shut off some of that aloneness and vulnerability and like allows people to come back forward. So
Yeah.
I think you still apply to mediation, but
Right. No, but I've like seen that a lot where it's just like it can sometimes just kind of work itself out at that point. So if it is just working itself out, then great. But if you've kind of dropped the ball and it's actually not working itself out and it's still like this thing, then start working on the follow through. That's kind of actually the scariest point in this process is the follow through and scheduling it, and that feeling leading up to a mediation honestly is one of the worst feelings in the world for me. Like if I'm the person in conflict and like walking into it and everything. On the other side of it, usually people feel a million times better, but walking in sucks. Dealing with conflict sucks. It's hard. It's just one of those like frustrating things that we all get into and we all have to deal with at some point. So what if you do need an advocate? It's just a really sticky situation. You've already tried talking several times. It's just not going well. If I'm gonna ask, let's just say I'm thinking like, okay, my housemate and I are having a conflict. I'm gonna see if our other housemate can be the advocate, right? That might not actually be the best situation. Potentially way too involved, potentially biased. Who knows what might be going on. So if I feel like I need an advocate to get the ball rolling and even talk about mediation, if I pick somebody who I know I'm friends with and I know I'm friends with, but doesn't actually live with us and isn't like, you know, all up in our daily house business, I might be like, hey, I feel like Kelly and I need mediation. Could you help us? Like, I don't even know how to start. Can you help? Please help. And she can say yes or no, but if she feels good about that, then she can get this process going. She can get consent, she can help us find a mediator, go back and forth, help us find a mediator that we both feel good about. So like Julie isn't even necessarily the mediator. She's like just the community helper who we've called in to help us even get to mediation because we're having a hard time getting anywhere with this conflict. Can also help us not drop the ball and work on follow through. So she's just kind of like our super helper in the situation. So that's our basic flowchart concept.
Well, so I made this and that's incredible and it's really great. I am sorry that we didn't think of making copies of this because it'd probably be really helpful to have this visually in your hand. But I think something like to take away for like even if you're not like you don't have the capacity to just draw this all out right now is something that I think is really great about this flowchart, like sans the visuals, is just the prompts that provided, like the questions that you can ask yourself. Like, and so for me, like my note taking when I look at this is just writing down, like, is this my own predictor or my issue, or am I projecting? Like, do I feel, what is my safety concern? And so like kind of writing those prompts down, I think is really, really great way to kind of like sort through your own feelings on this. But yeah, maybe we'll hopefully get this to people.
Yeah. We're gonna take a picture of it because we have a very strict no photos policy at the book fair, so we'll take a picture and we will send it out to people.
So what we're kind of gonna do now is we want to just kind of open up. We kind of want to just open up more like communication tips and just kind of help us all brainstorm together like some of these things.
Talk about things, how to listen, how to dialogue, and then we're going to do an exercise. And I would say at any point, questions and answers can happen. So we're going to talk about how, like the nuts and bolts of this. Like this is sort of a meta-analysis of how to like get through conflict resolution, but then we get into like how are we actually going to do that? Like we're sitting down and now we're doing it. What do we do?
How to talk about this shit, how to listen about this shit, and how to dialogue about this shit. That's what I literally wrote down. And then, yeah, we also just want to, I think another thing would be helpful is like just like give people the opportunity to like write down what they think is helpful when they talk. Yeah. But so I want to just quickly, before I go into like kind of asking, like going into like tips for how to talk about hard stuff, tips for how to listen, and tips for how to dialogue. I wanted to just kind of throw up a really helpful acronym that I like. It's called ENGAGE. So this is just for conflict, just like going through hard stuff with people and things. So E would be embody the hard times. So just let yourself, like sometimes I think folks just want, when they're feeling something really hard and intense, like someone's really pissed at you and you just don't want to think about it at all. You just compartmentalize it and throw it away, and you don't think about it. You don't think about the fact that you hurt someone's feelings. And what we want to encourage is try to sit in it. Try to like force yourself to sit in the conflict and like sit in those feelings. So that's the first one. So the other one would be negotiate. Negotiate is kind of exactly what the flowchart was. So like negotiating spaces, figuring out an action plan, all those types of things. G is give yourself care, and just knowing that like we return to ourselves to return to others, and like the best ways that we can be better to each other is by helping ourselves grow. And then actively listen, which we'll talk about more in a little bit. Grow from mistakes. So like just know that you're going to make mistakes and see it as a learning opportunity. And then embrace feedback. I just really like that acronym. I write it down sometimes when I'm thinking about like tough stuff. But now, we're gonna just kind of talk, kind of like all kind of brainstorm together to talk about kind of the different qualities of these things.
So we're gonna go quickly through this part because we're already getting towards the end. So, communicating feelings. We talked a little bit at the beginning about differentiating what we're projecting from actual like conflict that's happened between two people. Even in a conflict that's definitely happened between two people, like we have a disagreement, there's still the story we have in our head, or in NVC language it's often called our imagination about what is going on with the other person. And there are the facts of the situation. Like I said, did you eat my yogurt? And she said, I don't like yogurt or something. Maybe that's what was actually said. And then there's my imagination of what's going on, which could be like so many different things that I could be projecting about their feelings. Separating out his feelings and my feelings is the key to communication. So, and when we're talking about it, if I say, well, I feel like you just don't care about my breakfast, and my breakfast is really important to me, that's not actually a feeling, And I think we often like kind of try to communicate that way, and it tends to create a lot of defensiveness and even resentment in the other person, because really we have no idea what's going on with that other person. And for us to communicate in a way that in any way implies that we do really know what's going on with them is not very respectful, and it tends to not go very well at all. So let's just say, ate my yogurt. I do have a thing about yogurt in the morning. So I can say like, hey, I see that my yogurt is gone, and I have a thing about my yogurt, and I know it's weird, but I get kind of emotional about my yogurt, and I have this imagination in this story that may or may not be real. It's just my narrative right now, but I just want to share it with you, which is that you don't have a lot of concern about my like nutrition needs in the morning. And I get that that's my projection. So we can share those things, and it can be really useful, especially if we like live with people or are in a relationship or a close friendship, to share those things, but we need to share them in a super, super, super responsible way. And I feel like that's where MBC gets really confusing for a lot of people. It's like the I feel statement. It's like, well, we can use that I feel statement to say some pretty harsh stuff that aren't actually my feelings. So like my feeling is like, for reasons I don't even understand, I'm just emotional about the yogurt. Or my feeling is I feel really insecure because I feel like maybe my friend didn't invite me to the thing. Or I am really feeling bad about myself today and I hate how I look, and that's what's happening. Instead of like, hey, sweetie person, I project the bazillion things that we project on sweetie people when we're feeling really horrible about ourselves, whatever that could be. So those are the feelings, and we have to like get to whatever that crappy feeling is. We don't have to share it. But if we want to share the narrative that we're having about the other person, we have to take responsibility that that's a narrative, it's a projection, it's not necessarily what's going on with them. We know it's not necessarily what's going on with them. I'm just sharing like my crazy in my head. You know, do you have some space to hear this right now? Those conversations I find tend to go well. Like no matter how crazy the crazy is in my head, if I'm fully owning it as my own, it goes pretty well most of the time. And that really is like the really short and sweet of how to like talk about feelings. Own your story. Be okay with it. It's fine that you have that story, but like take full responsibility for that's your narrative, it's your story, it's your projection. You have no idea what's going on with that other person. They might just be feeling so full of love for you that day they can't even stand it. Over here, I feel unloved, and I am projecting it onto you right now. And just own it. It's okay. And it's amazing the difference in communication. So let's just say we're just gonna like breeze through this because we're almost at the end, but we'll do a little exercise and we'll have some question and answer time. Let's just say I've said that over here needs to be focusing on active listening, because there are a lot of ways we could be hearing that.
So what's the conflict going on right now? So I stole your yogurt.
You ate it.
I ate your yogurt.
Well, I don't know what happened. Actually,
okay,
that's my story.
Yeah, and you feel like that I was doing that because I just don't respect you at all. I don't see like it being like fact or need. It's like I think it's all the above. Like, and for me, I think for me the way that feeling versus fact is helpful for me is when I'm sorting through my own feelings in my head. So like when I feel, a lot of us out there have trauma and insecurities or mental health issues, and I know that it clouds my vision. I know that like I have a hella insecurity of just not feeling liked enough all the time. And so let's say she didn't invite me to her yogurt party, and I feel like Julie hates me. The fact isn't that Julie hates me. Julie never said I hate. I feel that way. And so for me, I find that to be a really humbling experience for how I struggle with conflict. So that's what I mean by fact versus feeling, is like go checking that in your head. But yes, and you also bring up a really good point, which is a really important part of conflict resolution is understanding what your needs are. So like I appreciate you saying that. And also, you know, another thing about fact is that another really, really big thing about talking about conflict is multiple realities exist. People have multiple narratives of a story. Like, and I think what's really important about active listening is accepting that multiple realities exist in a situation. That my story is correct and yours. Like, my feelings around a scenario happened, that is valid. So multiple realities exist is a huge thing.
Although there's also the ability to use that space to actually clarify facts, such as,
Absolutely, yeah.
I think you took my yogurt and now I have all these feelings about it, but then you're like, oh, I didn't take it.
Yeah.
And it
It's
turns out
actually right here in the back of the page.
Or actually did invite me to the yogurt party, but got the wrong address.
So what's called a small plug for actual facts.
Yeah.
Yeah. So listening. So what you do, somebody has asked for consent to check in about some stuff, and you said yes, and they're telling you a bunch of stuff about the story in their head and their narrative and their feelings and their needs. What are we going to do during that? Is that easy to hear? Spoiler alert. Not easy. I'm just going to talk a little bit about like how to listen, even though it's hard.
What
It is really hard.
I just wanted to kind of say two things I just added, which is visualizing what's being said. So if they're sharing about how like they came to the house and the house was a mess, like just actually like visualizing what they were seeing. And another thing about you don't have to agree you don't have to agree with their narrative, but a really, really helpful thing to do is try putting yourself in their shoes. I had a horrible conflict like 7 or 8 years ago with someone to this day I just don't believe that they were correct in any capacity, but I have worked really hard to be like, but I can see why they felt that way. Like I can try to put myself in their shoes and know how they struggle, like how they like we all have different ways that we function with the world. We all have different anxieties, fears, and if we know someone and can kind of like put myself in my shoes and know that yogurt's really important to you, even though I don't give a crap about yogurt, that can help me create empathy to like understand and let me hear them more.
And then moving into the dialoguing, that's kind of like going back to square one of the communication process. Like if James has just communicated with me about the yogurt and I've just heard what they said and I've reflected it back, then I'm going to say, would you feel okay right now if I responded to that? And can either say yes or no. Maybe they have a little more to share. Maybe they're like, actually, I'm going to go ground myself a little bit. Could we get back to this in an hour? Or more likely, they're going to be like, yeah, sure, go ahead and respond. And then we're going to talk about our narrative and our feelings, and the other person is going to hopefully use really active listening. And we just keep going back and forth. Getting consent in communication is really, really critical and important for every step of the process. It's just like any other consent process. There's no blanket consent ever. I mean, at some point you'll have some natural communication, but if it's still really formal dialoguing back and forth, just check, like, hey, can I respond to that one point? Hey, do you feel okay taking a break? How would you feel if we talked about this aspect of the situation or whatever, and just keep working through it.